Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Deep Linkers, where we talk to some of our favorite creators and experts in the online space. I'm Eric Rodriguez, joined today by my co-host Drew Grant. As always, we're very excited for today's guest. You've seen her work all over the internet, various corners of online work. You can find her currently on her show Power User and her new newsletter, User Mag. It is Taylor Lorenz. Taylor, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. We started this a little while ago this year, and we immediately thought, Drew's talked to you before on other interviews we've done. So we wanted to have you on this setting in particular, just to sort of go over, sort of your own personal journey with, working online and sort of like your insights of what you've seen over the last however many years that you've been sort of like delved into it. It's been such a journey for you. And we wanted to get to your expertise on some of the topics, especially right now in the world that we're living today, with the internet culture and such. So for me personally, one thing I've always, admired about your work is just how plugged in you are, because I know the undertaking that goes into sort of being on top of things, especially for the way internet sort of like rapidly, outpaces itself every other day. And for you, what was your sort of first, exposure to like online content that made you realize this isn't just like, a hobby or something you're interested in, but it became like a passion, something that you really are like, sort of like dedicated to studying?
Yeah, I guess that was back quite a while ago, because I'm an elder millennial now. But back in 2009, I got on Tumblr, and it was such a sort of transformative platform for me, because I think before that I had Facebook, of course, in college and stuff, but it was more like about adding people that you knew offline. And for Tumblr, it was like the first time I was really exposed to a lot of sort of like new people online. And so, yeah, I wasn't as online growing up. Like I was on AIM and stuff, but I wasn't like, I didn't have a MySpace and stuff. So it was really Tumblr that was my gateway.
Not to jump ahead to today's stuff, but I know that we've talked a lot about like brain rot and what brain rot is in terms of content. And I've just been thinking, is there an equivalent? Is brain rot just something I don't understand because I'm myself an elder millennial? Like if I'd been looking at Tumblr back in the day, would that have seemed like brain rot, or is brain rot like a very specific set of content?
Yeah, I think brain rot just speaks to like hyper online content. They used to call it YouTube poop. Do you remember that term?
Yeah.
There's always these sort of little like language like phrases and things that people come up with to speak about the phenomenon of being hyper online, or sort of like being able to understand like a string of online references.
Yeah,
so it's the same as being terminally online.
And we all are now, specifically with the way things are going. It's tough to sort of unplug from a lot of it, just because it's so influential in our everyday lives. Even if you want to sort of step away from it and like get outside, so many things are influenced by culture and shifts on the internet. And like I said, you're plugged into so many things on a day-to-day basis. On User Mag, I read every thing that you post, and so much of it is like these very sort of like niche subjects of like what is like the Stan Wars mean to like our political climate and stuff like that. And I'm always fascinated by the ability to sort of stay on top of those things. How do you find the balance of being plugged in, watching everything, keeping tabs on everything, but also keeping that distance so you're not sort of overwhelmed?
I don't have a distance. I have no balance. Every time I try to make a balance, it gets destroyed. So literally just a couple hours ago, I woke up early to watch this football game, and I was really excited to do that. And then, so this big person with millions of followers started encouraging people to dox me, and like all this crazy stuff happened. And it's just like, I guess like I've found a lot of peace in sort of giving up trying to have that balance, and just accepting that like that my job requires me to be really online and not like stressing out about it too much. And so that's kind of how I'm living. But if somebody has a better system, I'm all ears.
It's always been fascinating to me that you've become such a, your brand has become such a firebrand, for a lot of this online discourse and a lot of the hate that kind of comes from a certain subset of niche right-wing manosphere culture. Because, if you read extremely online, I think if you read a lot of your content, you don't take a particularly virulent look at any of these places. You're not really quick to condemn, and you're not, I don't think, at least, one of the more snarky writers. I mean, you really are just kind of plugged in
but
and writing.
it has nothing to do with my work. I mean, it's about my work, but it's really about that I'm like a woman on the internet, and that I'm an outspoken progressive woman on the internet, and also that I cover online influence, which is something these sort of terrible actors desperately want. And they don't want someone like me articulating the system and articulating things like how the far right weaponizes the online spaces, right? Like they want dumb sycophants that don't even know, how to turn on like a Twitch stream or something, like, because they don't want accountability. And so I think, yeah, people that actually read my work are always like, I'm confused. Like, why are they so outraged? And it's like, well, it's because, I mean, I don't think they would be as outraged if I was a man. I think I would still be getting a lot of the hate that I get because, again, I cover them in a challenging way. But there are other people on my beat that cover things even, I mean, someone like Will Sommer, for instance, or Jared Holt, like they cover extremism more aggressively even, but they're just straight white men. And so they're not going to get the same hate as me.
No, and you're totally right. I mean, like I said, especially just this month in particular, late November of 2024, we've seen, through your pieces as well, that's just the extremism that is so easily utilized through different platforms, through different tactics, not even just like straight politically adjacent or focused work, but just like the way it influences like I said, like stan culture, just like the culture around being online. And for yourself, when you sort of look at, say a new budding sort of trend or cultural movement, how do you have any like processes of like how you start to dissect that?
Say like the left's Joe Rogan or something, that conversation.
I don't know if that's a trend. That was more like I saw a bad tweet at 1 a.m. and was like, I have to write a blog post explaining why this is stupid. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just sort of like monitor things online. The bar for me for a story is really like, what does this phenomenon say about something else? Like, what does this say about the future of media or technology, or sort of like what learning can you get from this trend? Because there's so much reporting. I mean, it could literally be written by like an AI that's just like, so-and-so TikTokers are doing XYZ, but it doesn't, it doesn't give context and information. So yeah.
No, I mean, it's so fascinating too, because watching stuff trickle up almost from, you have these really popular Instagram accounts that like everybody in the office is super obsessed with. We are like the passion fruit super fans of Taylor 3.0 and everything, or we're just huge fans of like everything you do. And I just wonder, like, sometimes I'll watch something kind of come up or percolate through what you're tweeting about or posting on Instagram on these meme accounts, and how that kind of works its way into what you're writing about. I think especially around the election, that kind of stuff. And it is interesting to see how these more niche topics of what we do online and the stuff that you cover has now become the front and like forefront of the conversation about like what went wrong with the election and what's wrong with
it's very validating.
Yeah.
And I just have to say, I only got 2 negative reviews of my entire book. One on sort of a website that actually wrote the review before I had finished filing the book. I actually hadn't turned in my draft yet, which was funny. They published it the summer before my book even came out. I was like, guys, just wait till I finish writing it before you write your takedown. And then another one I got 2 reviews in the LA Times. One review by their tech columnist was like incredibly positive. And then there was this guy who's like an old, like White House correspondent or something. And he was like really angry because he basically was just like, these influencers are all vapid idiots and it's a fad. And, she's silly and stupid. And like, it was so funny because I was just reading this like, wow, I've never read anything so out of touch. And like, I can't wait to be vindicated. And like, I feel a lot of that, like a lot of times when people criticize my work, they're not criticizing my reporting. What they're reacting to is more the shift in media and their resentment of it. And I'm totally sympathetic to that. Like, I get it. Like, there's so much toxicity in the influencer world. But the reality is that this is, these changes in media, as my book details, have been happening for decades, and it's not going back. And so we sort of do need to, at some point, accept the reality that we live in and in order to change it. So
we might not like the fact that, like, with, you know, the manosphere or whatever helped sway some of the Gen Z votes this election, but it absolutely did. And I think that ignoring it is exactly how we kind of got into a certain situation that we might be in now, because it's just to deny that influence, even though we might not like it. It might not be the smartest thing. It might like play to the, you know, the parts of society that we think is stupid or vapid or unattractive, you know, not intellectual or whatever, is literally to deny ourselves votes, is to deny ourselves influence and deny ourselves power. And that's, you know, I think now people are realizing just how wrong-headed that approach is.
Yeah, I think they're starting to realize that, like, the media ecosystem has shifted, and Democrats being unable to navigate the internet is a problem.
Yeah, you know, like, you know, as things change, you know, we see in all the corners of, you know, traditional media and the internet content like start to mesh together because, like you said, those trends are coming. They're really influencing the way things are sort of changing, especially for, say, our corner. You know, Drew and I come from like you know, entertainment industry stuff, and we see a lot of, you know, like colleagues, stuff like that get, you know, sort of like turned up because the idea of being equated with influencers or like content creators, like kind of like, you know, ruffles their feathers a little bit in terms of like, oh, like I had like this sort of like, you know, upper level sort of, you know, prestige I thought about, like, you know, where I was, and now I had to like sort of, you know, mingle with people who I don't really think earned the right to like sort of like stand next to me in certain regards. When you're, you know, covering sort of like, you know, or at least advocating for the awareness of like what those people are, how do you approach, you know, like sort of like the bullet points? So what are the bullet points, I guess, of like, you know, why that those people and that work has value, and I guess in any field that they're evolving into?
Like, how do I articulate that they have value? You mean like their work is valuable?
How would you explain, I guess, the value that the work can have toward, like, I guess, the industry that
I mean, it's media, and I think like media is how we like get information in the world. It's literally like our media environment matters, and people operating and dominating people's information diets matter. That's like, I mean, this is why we have journalism. This is why we have entertainment. Like, it's like, I don't know, you know, like.
Do you think it's equatable to like the blog situation that there was back in the day? I remember, like, you know, oh, you're a blogger, you're not a journalist. Like, if you're a blogger.
Oh, those people. Oh, you mean like when people dismiss and say like,
yes.
Oh, content creator is some like negative thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's very funny. And I think they're telling on themselves. This is like when, for a couple years, they don't do it as much anymore, again, because I think TikTok is now so relevant. But when TikTok first launched, I obviously have covered TikTok literally since Musical.ly days, and the entire right-wing media and all of these really snotty people in legacy media were like, she's a TikTok reporter, she's the #1 TikTok reporter, da da da. And I was like, wow, I think they're saying this in a negative thing because they don't take TikTok. They think TikTok is just some teen dance app. But them calling me the #1 TikTok reporter really helped my career because it made everyone like, TikTok that's like somebody being like, you're the #1 Google reporter. Like, you're like, yeah, I do want to be perceived that way. Yeah. Thank you. That's helping me get sources and helping me, you know, get my work taken more seriously among people that actually get it. So I think the same thing with content creator. I've never shied being, you know, away from being called a content creator myself, just the way that I never shied away from being called a blogger. And I think anybody else in that position should feel the same way. Like, these are very legitimate jobs, and anybody saying them in a sort of maligning way, like, they just sound ignorant. It's like how when I started covering YouTube, even back in the early 2010s, people would say, oh, you just write about this site for cat videos. And it's not what it is. But them saying that for years, it sort of just helped make me even more seen as more of an authority. And so I think that's how content creators in that position should view it.
Right.
When it comes to things like, you know, scandals or controversies, when it comes to content creators, you know, we are seeing stuff now where it's like Mr. Beast is getting called out on 100 different platforms, including our own, for rightly so, for, you know, abuses of labor and how he treats his employees. But there's also like DramaTube, and there's a whole ecosystem of people doing call outs and cancellations in this culture that is a microcosm of a larger shift on, you know, this term of cancellation or canceling people. When do you think that some of these arguments or claims kind of drip up. I'm not really even sure of the phrasing, but elevate to something that is worth covering. Is it a level of like, okay, this creator is big enough to say that this person should be held accountable, or is it just the severity of like what's being accused, or what it says about culture?
I think if somebody's doing something bad, it's okay to talk about the fact that they're doing something bad, whether they're big or small, right? Like if I was causing direct harm to someone or scamming someone, I shouldn't be doing that, right? Like, so somebody, if that, like, if I was scamming people, if I only scammed 5 people, right? Like, somebody could be like, hey, that girl's scamming people. Don't give her your money or whatever, right? Like, or like, hey, that person keeps saying slurs. Maybe they shouldn't do that. Or like, maybe they only have 2 employees, but they're abusing both of them. So, I think unfortunately, as people amass power and influence, or when they're small, they use that as kind of a shield, and they sort of say, oh, well, I'm just a wee little me, da, 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 da. And it's like, okay, well, maybe the anger, like I get it. Sometimes the anger online is disproportionate to the sort of quote unquote crime committed, but and I'm not really for like cancel culture or whatever. I just think all these conversations are just kind of stupid. I mean, with respect to Mr. Beast, the reason he's getting quote unquote canceled now is because there was such a flood of stuff for years. And by the way, I reported on all of this in 2021. Let's not forget. And what happened? Like all of the biggest YouTubers rallied around their king, made all of these videos smearing me, like, oh, she's just trying to take Mr. Beast down because she works at the New York Times. It's so funny because when I wrote that story, it was so watered down. I mean, there was like so much that didn't make it into that story. And of course, it's all come out now, but it's like, I just think like, wouldn't it have been better and cause people less harm if these issues were resolved years ago when reporters first started covering it? So we should want accountability. We should want accountability in this, in any space. But that said, I think that sometimes these like hate campaigns against people are not productive. I don't think I think there's a difference between accountability and hate campaign, but there are people that sort of try to frame their smear campaigns as quote unquote accountability, and those are ultimately very unproductive.
I think that kind of goes to a larger point, though. I see Eric, but like I think that goes to a larger point, though, about like what the difference is between like journalism and a lot of what goes on online. I mean, there is accountability and ethics in journalism. There's like a certain line you have to toe, and there's editors and stuff. Whereas a lot of these crusaders, activists, people who get activated online, or they find something online and then they want to start doing journalism. And you can see a couple of them. Like there's, at least from the Mr. Beast thing that I'm watching unfold in real time, like Dogpack and some of the others, they're trying to engage on journalism journalism accountability. They're trying to do things of like, oh, I keep my sources private, but it's like they're having to learn these things in real time because they don't come from a journalism background. And so what is acceptable to do, burning a sword, this is something they kind of have to learn in real time. And I just wonder if there is something to be said as much as we cover this new journalism or this new kind of world, if there's something to be said for the journalism framework that is kind of
good journalism. The reality is a lot of people in the mainstream media don't follow that framework. A lot of people in the mainstream media also post dubious things based on their personal grievances or whatever, and post completely false articles and misinformation. So I don't think the traditional media is like what we should like put above things or be like, oh, see, this is why we need to go back to reading the New York Times. Like the New York Times is also incredibly unreliable and a ton of shit. The point is that like, this is why we need to, like you said, adopt journalistic principles and understand like, there's things like these concept of conflict of interest, right? That like, maybe that's good. Maybe we, these are good standards to have around certain things. And I think it's good for creators to adopt that. I think journalism is a practice and everybody should aim to practice it as honestly as possible.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, traditional media being such a large part of your career for many years. This year you've gone independent and you are focusing more on user mag and power user. I guess how has that experience been just in this the few couple of months that you've made that transition?
It's been 1 month, so I'm
oh my god!
Feels like a year already.
Feels like a year.
Tell me about it. It's been great. I mean, I never wanted to work in traditional media. That was never my career goal. It's never been anything that I've ever aspired to do. And I feel like, especially when my editor retired in June, when I made the decision to go independent, it was like those that meme that's like record scratch, freeze frame, like, how did you get here? But it's kind of like that feeling of like, I'm so grateful for the opportunities that I've had and the amazing people that I've gotten to work with at some of these places, even if I think that they're not great like institutions generally. But I want my own platform and I want complete freedom and autonomy. And that's something that I've always valued and wanted. So hoping the economics can work. I need people to pay for User Mag. Check it out, subscribe, share it, like it. And my YouTube channel too. But yeah, it's fun. It's just fun to get to be able to like talk about things and offer a bit more analysis than I was ever able to do in traditional.
Yeah. Did you have any specific, topics or subjects that you had in mind when you sort of launched that to like dive into that you weren't able to, before, just because it's like either too niche or like, very esoteric in terms of like, what you're covering?
Well, so many pieces of it's not like topics. I mean, my stories were killed all the time in traditional media. There's like so many dead Taylor Lorenz stories in the CMS of like all of these places. But I just like having a direct relationship with my audience. You know what I mean? I just like being able to like hear feedback. And again, like I said, offer a little bit more analysis, do a little bit more like curation as well. Like my newsletter is not just my own writing, but it's also like what I'm reading, what I'm seeing on the internet. Like it's sort of like a little peek into what I'm consuming, which is the number one question that I get from people is like, what are you following? What are you seeing online? And so I try to package that in my newsletter.
Right. And I've been keeping up with User Mag, since you launched it, and it's been really great. I personally just love the again, like the cultural analysis of like, it's one thing to just look at, what an Ariana Grande fan is saying on Twitter. What does that mean for the larger story of, like what we're doing here? I personally, it's just like, I love seeing those type of stories. And it's like, you're really like pulling it apart, dissecting like what the implications are. And even for, users like on Power User, you interviewed AJ from the Costco guys. And just, so being able to sort of reach out to find, people like that online. Do you have like any sort of criteria of like, who you're trying to find, who you're looking for, or like even who you might feel comfortable just sort of like reaching out to
For
like,
my podcast?
for the podcast. It's
Yeah. For the podcast, it's pretty random. It's just whatever I'm interested in this week. I'm actually trying to switch up the format of the show a little bit. Right now, it's just a weekly tech and online culture show. Definitely take a listen. Interviews, there's a ton of backlog of interviews on tons of different topics, but it's very kind of like news, tech news, like whatever is the topic of the week that I want to talk about. But I might evolve the format a little bit to be a little bit more conversational and like a little bit more in line with my newsletter where there's a bit more analysis. But yeah, I'm also just trying to focus on my YouTube as well and put out my own content and my own thoughts on there.
I mean, what would you measure success by, both in terms of User Mag or the podcasts or even your work? You've done a couple things for Passion Fruit now, which is pretty cool.
I love Passion Fruit.
We love you. And it's been so good to like, just be able to read your work in so many different formats and see you, in places maybe you were restricted from, being able to do when you were in traditional news media. But what would you say your measure of success is? Is it, obviously for anyone there would be a monetary element because it is independent.
Being able to cover my healthcare costs would be the biggest success in the world for me.
True. Yeah. I mean, I think that's true.
It's like kind of the American version of success.
American dream. Yeah.
Can you cover healthcare?
White picket fence is just, can you cover your own healthcare costs?
Yeah, I've given up on ever owning property in any capacity.
Same.
It's not gonna happen, but it would be great.
My parents always try to say, "Oh, it's gonna happen when we die," and I'm like, "That's the grimmest thought I could ever think of." Like, I can only inherit house, like a house when my parents.
Also, it's like you're lucky that your parents have a house for you to inherit. You know what I mean?
I'd rather have like alive parents though than own a property. I don't know. Maybe
100%.
What I was going to say though is, we watch a lot of commentary channels. Our friend Elliot Dewberry has one, Internet Today, and we noticed like maybe the second day the User Mag had an issue, like the second issue of User Mag, they were already pulling it up and being like, and User Mag today, and I had to stop for a second. I was like, well, User Mag, where have I heard that term before? And I was like, oh, that's Taylor's newsletter. They were just like on it immediately. Like all these commentary channels was like immediately sourcing you,
Yeah, I've been sourced in a lot. I was on they put it literally, it was on MSNBC or something in the first week too.
That's awesome.
I think it's had a lot of impact so far. I write about viral things. So it's generally kind of what people are talking about and trying to help people understand what's going on the internet and through the lens of, some of it's like a deep dive on something I'm interested in or some stats on streaming or whatever,
Oh, the live streaming article you did recently was fascinating.
I need an editor is the problem is I don't have an editor anymore. So my writing, I wish I had an editor to tighten it up. I just wrote a freelance piece for The Information and the editor was so good. I was like, oh, can you make my writing sound better everywhere? But I just need a few more subscribers to pay for that.
Yeah, you need a freelance editor. Yeah.
Well, editor, I mean, that's funny too, because that's it's the equivalent of needing an editor for doing any video work too. It's this luxury that you have to teach yourself how to do, because most people, you want to be able to afford to pay people. It's one of these things that an editor in either situations, and I've, as Eric being one kind of editor, me being the other kind of editor, it's very clear that's the first thing that get axed when you go into independent in any way. It's just you can't afford it.
You have to do it all yourself.
Exactly. And I think it does make people the better for it. I think it makes people have to self-edit, and I think it makes people have to learn these skill sets and how much time it actually goes into editing your own work. But on the other hand, there's that push-pull of maybe the work suffers for it, and maybe it takes too long to get out because you have to teach it to yourself. So yeah, it is one of these these kind of things where it's that's maybe the first thing that people should pay for when you get a little bit of extra income, is pay for the edit, because that's going to make your work come out quicker and it's going to make your work come out tighter, either way.
So, well, I was gonna say though, those self-taught skills are super valuable once you get going with any sort of independent creative effort. And when you got started with User Mag and jumping into the independent era that you're in now, were there any just obviously from covering years of content creator news, were there any specific sort of tricks or anything you had in your back pocket you thought to sort of think ahead about in terms of how you wanted to approach that work?
Good question. Did I have anything in my head to sort of think about?
So sort of check marks you want to make sure this is done, this is in place while I get this going.
I'm not that organized, unfortunately. I have no organizational skills. So
that's a good answer.
I mean, it took a long time to plan the launch for sure. That took me all summer. And to get the branding finalized and to write my post. And oh my God, I made an entire announcement video and then I fucked up the footage of the announcement video. So I had to film a new announcement video in under 2 hours after a red eye at 6 a.m. in my friend's office. So yeah, it was there were things like that, but it was, it was all good.
Yeah. It's because, and that's, like I said, that's a great answer in itself, just because the more people I talk to in the creator space, it's such a common theme of I kind of just went with it, because the most common piece of advice I hear is just do it, just do what you got to do, otherwise you'll never get it done. This
is the advice for everything. Literally, you just have to do it. Anytime anybody asks me for advice, and I've thought of this recently with my YouTube, because I'm trying to grow my YouTube and I keep making videos and then never publishing them because I think they're bad. And I was like, you know what? I need to just do it and post, because otherwise you don't get better. And I think it's a hard hill to climb sometimes as a creative person, especially if you're kind of a perfectionist and you there's a gap between what you see others producing and what you're able to produce maybe with your current skill sets. So I think it's anything you want to do, you've got to just sort of give it your best shot.
Right. Going independent, is there a way that you feel, there's resources that you obviously have when we just talked about some of them, the editing, both sides of it. There's resources you have when you're part of an institution, but is there anything that you feel you definitely have gained going independent? Maybe we've asked this question in another kind of phrasing before, but is there any kind of is there any sort of things that you miss or any sort of things that you've gained going independent?
The only thing I miss, well, my editor, but he left. So, but I miss him every day. I miss my colleagues because I loved my colleagues. Like I love my colleagues so much. Drew Harwell, one of the best tech reporters of our generation, in my opinion. Will Aramis, Naomi Nix. I mean, there's just so many talented people. The Washington Post tech team is really good. And that's true of every place I've ever worked. Like I've loved my editor and I've loved my team. What I haven't loved is management. I do not fuck with the bosses at these places because they're like billionaire run, billionaire owned, billionaire controlled media. And it's sort of just against my values. Like I think a lot of these places make decisions about things that I don't agree with, really. And that doesn't mean that I've ever had like tension. I mean, I've never like gotten in trouble at like the New York Times or anything. You know what I think I met the editor in chief once or twice and it was perfectly nice. I just like, I wouldn't run the organization the same way. And I don't like, you know, I don't like the like return to office stuff, like just that sort of arbitrary bullshit. So, or like having to be on status meetings every day, like just the type of stuff that comes with like institutional type jobs. So I love not having to deal with that and be independent and not having to have a billionaire honestly own and control the media outlet that I work for because I just think it gives you a huge amount more autonomy. And I just like having a more direct relationship with readers too, like hearing from people directly, getting feedback directly. I like that people are actually subscribing to me. They're not just reading my article because it came up on a homepage somewhere without context. Like they actually know who I am. And so they read my work in the context of knowing who I am. So yeah, all of that I love, but it is isolating. It's very lonely compared to being on a team. Like I just like miss my coworkers so much because I love all my coworkers.
Yeah, totally.
That's why I'm in the passion fruit Slack all the time.
Definitely.
We love having you.
Hey guys, Drew Grant here from Passion Fruit. Just wanted to thank you all for tuning into this episode of Deep Linkers. To everyone that's commented on our videos, shared our work, or otherwise supported the channel, we see you, we appreciate you, and we've got a lot of exciting things coming for the creator community at Passion Fruit. If you haven't already, the usual stuff on YouTube always helps us, like hitting that like button and subscribing with that little bell so you'll be notified about new videos. We also have a bi-weekly Passion Fruit newsletter that focuses on the creator industry, which you can sign up for through the link in the video description and the pinned comment. Twice a week, you'll get our best stories, as well as exclusive interviews, expert reviews, and the latest resource guides to help you navigate every stage of the creator journey. We even got a weekend newsletter on the way, with a curated creator spotlight that focuses on the best online content from the people who make it. You. Thanks again for supporting Passion Fruit and Reactorverse and Deep Linkers and helping make your content your business and giving love to people who make the web.
Yeah. And yeah, you bring up, the idea of working for, like a corporation, like, so like the, implications of, being under that umbrella. And I just think it's interesting now we're getting into like a really significant era of like, content creation where channels are turning into like, corporations in themselves. So you just wrote about Alan Chicken Chow, who, just like launched his, production studio saying this is coming for Hollywood. And we're seeing that sort of like, era of like, channels getting bigger and bigger, doing live events, live like, productions, big conglomerate type, productions. And we were watching, Drew and I were watching Gabby Bell last night. She was talking about, the shift in commentary, YouTube specifically, and how so much of that is driven by, sensationalism, like negativity, just because like that's sort of like metrics that help push an algorithmic, form of success. I, looking over the last, 8 so years of, our online culture, it's definitely been a big shift. I would say that, negativity has a significant part to play in like the way things are sort of ran now. As, you've covered that arc, of content creation, have you seen any significant shifts in just the way, like the productions of certain channels have like evolved over the years in terms of how they're outputting their work and to not just be, seen, as a product, but as just an advertisement?
Yeah, definitely. What do you mean, like not just as a product but as an advertisement?
Like there's like the two hands. There's like the one of like, I think Dan Morrell, we just spoke to him. He said, there's like the old era of YouTube was like, the product that you make was the thing that people latched onto. Now it's about the packaging.
Yes, I see what you're saying. I totally agree. Yes,
Yeah.
I've seen that actually. I've seen that. I think I saw that that video, or I've seen like people talking about that on YouTube. I think it's so correct. I think it's just like, I think YouTube generally is like a huge marketing vehicle, whether it's for your podcast or your hard seltzer brand or your energy drink. Like, it's just like, I don't know. It's interesting. Like people just approach it so much more about as a business. I think it used to be so much more about self-expression and creativity, and a lot has been taken out of it for that reason, I guess. Like, I think it's gotten very like, I'm here to maximize growth and, engagement and sell whatever I'm selling or push whatever media product I'm pushing. So yeah, it's, I don't know. What I thought was interesting about Alan, who has Alan's Universe, who's obviously one of the biggest YouTubers. He makes content for children. I think it's interesting just the rise of sort of scripted content on YouTube. And there's just a lot more scripted content aimed at children on YouTube in recent years. And the companies that are doing it seem to do it pretty well. I haven't checked in on Brat lately, but I think it's doing quite well. Brat does make scripted shows. They were sort of like one of the OG people that make scripted shows for children. But even the stuff like Darman or, some of these like stuff like that.
So fun. We just watched a Drew Gooden video, I think, about that was the one about Brat, but it was like basically they've just turned some of their shows into actual advertisements.
Oh, right.
Like they're just advertising in the show they'll
Yes.
have characters pull out a Snickers and be like, time for like a hangry break or whatever, and they'll just run the ad inside the content, or they'll form the actual content of the show around,
which is what happened in TV too.
Yeah.
It's like reinventing television, I feel like, in different ways. But yeah, so I think there's a lot of innovation actually happening in the children's space. And I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't start to see more scripted content coming out, like, just more sort of intentionally on YouTube. It's all in Burbank. You know what? Isn't that interesting? Like Mythical, Try Guys. Yeah, but I was thinking I should write something about that, because it's just, there's that like strip where there's like 10 or 15 YouTubers have all sort of coalesced around there.
And it's funny because that's where traditional
yeah, exactly. Burbank. That's what I think is so funny.
Well, from living around there, like we've noticed that there's just like a ton of empty space. Like there are all these vacant spaces for creative projects, and you'll see like places actually advertises like, this is our, come here and do your independent creator studio stuff.
Yeah.
Like their spaces are literally advertising to creators, it feels like, even though that's not necessarily the demo you think lives in Burbank.
Yeah.
We could say from living in Burbank, there's not that many young, hip creative professionals you see walking down the street, but there is sort of like this burgeoning community, it feels like, of at least trying to get the commercial real estate, maybe as a way to just recoup some of the losses from COVID era. There's all these empty commercial spaces, so why not lease it to, especially if it was originally for studios, why not lease it to these independent content creators, especially if
they have the resources to do it. Go for it.
Exactly.
And just going back to like the idea of like sensationalism and negativity online. I just wanted to ask, are there any sort of like creators that you're following these days that you sort of like go against that grain in terms of like how they're covering content and like just not buying into that?
I love Alice Capel. She's a video essay sort of critic. She talks a lot about feminism. I like a lot of like online culture commentary channel people, but women, Tiffany Ferguson. She doesn't post as often as I wish she did, but Mina Lee, is it Mina Lay or Mina Lee? You know what I'm talking about?
I think it's Lay.
Lay.
I think it's Lay.
I always say people's names wrong in my own head, and then I'm never sure. But she's so phenomenal, and she has a Substack too, where she writes really thoughtfully. And she's one of my favorite, like, sort of cultural critics. Yeah, there are a lot of interesting. I think a lot of like women have interesting channels about the internet, and they're never given credit because I think YouTube is such a male-dominated space, and the commentary world is very male-dominated. But there's a lot of really thoughtful women that are like Alice and others that sort of like make content about the internet. Kat Abu as well is really smart. She covers a lot of like extremism. She did a great video recently on the rise of like white nationalist influencers, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was one of your pieces lately about the large majority of content creators being conservative men. Is such
I
a
need to make that into a
thing.
video. I just don't have time.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I for the better part of a year now, for Passion Fruit, I've been hosting a podcast called the Reactorverse Podcast, where I talk to people, and specifically in the YouTube reaction space. I spoke with someone this past week, KL, with her channel Movies with KL, and she made a point that I was already aware of, but I didn't think about it until more recently because of this past election and such. How she says a majority of the reaction demographic are men. And I just find that very fascinating in this sort of era where we're realizing how much toxic manosphere content is like affecting young men, and sort of radicalizing them towards certain ideals of what they want them to think about themselves and the culture, whereas reaction channels, at least from my own experience, has been a really positive experience because it's a type of material that goes in that you have to be open-minded about it. You have to be open-minded about what you're seeing. You can't be negative up front because that the audience doesn't facilitate that. I just find that very fascinating. Have you found yourself any other sort of subcultures like that are sort of built upon more positivity than negativity, just by the nature of what the content is and with how they approach it?
Feminism, I guess, feminist content.
Good. That makes sense.
Honestly, it's just thoughtful. Anybody that covers extremism, they're just very thoughtful and great sort of thinkers. They're not engaging in reactionary stuff. They're not biased towards anything. They're just sort of there to educate you.
Right.
I don't know. Those aren't really content genres. You know what I mean? Those are just and I don't even know if that's true for most of those genres. I just the women. I'm just thinking of people like Alice. You know what I mean? She's not out getting in drama or something. She's, of course, she deals with attacks and smears, but she's just sort of she's a thoughtful person. Yeah, I don't know. I don't watch a lot of I guess the content that I watch is just, it runs the gamut of so much stuff. And there's so many individual creators that I'm I don't even know, Dan Henschel, how do you even categorize someone like that?
Right.
There's just a lot of people.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, that kind of goes in I think one of my final questions to round this out. But I want to know, what do you said that there is hard to figure out separation, I guess, between work-life balance. But when it is time to relax, when it is time to just consume for entertainment purposes and consume just to turn off your brain or to enjoy something, I mean, who are you looking at these days? Is it content creators? Is it actual old school TV and streaming? Or
no, I only watch horror movies, so I watch a lot of horror movies. Yeah, it's the only kind of movie I watch. I watch one almost every night.
Wow,
it's the only way I can relax.
Wow,
so...
have you seen any good ones lately? Have you seen Heretic?
Yeah.
No, wait, have I?
The Hugh Grant one where he's where it's in theaters right now. It's A24.
No, I haven't, because it's in theaters and I can't go to theaters right now because of my health stuff. But
Gotcha.
I will see it as soon as it comes on streaming. I did see The Substance, which is not so much of a horror movie. I mean, it's kind of it's a horror movie, but it's more of a
got that. I got that right here. The actor.
Oh my god, I love it. Yeah, but I like horror. I mean, I like all the commercial Blumhouse stuff. I like everything. Horror movies are my biggest interest, I guess, outside of the internet. And I love thinking about what makes us scared. And I don't know, there's something about it. If I didn't work in media, I would have loved to work in the horror world, because I just think it's so fun.
That's so funny. Yeah,
it's my biggest it's the only thing I care about. It's my main thing.
That's also Drew's whole thing. Yeah,
that's my entire identity, is how much I love horror movies. It's really.
I think we talked about this before though, because I feel every time I've said this to you, you've told me how much you like it too. Because I think we talked about this.
I literally, I'm just it's feels like a revelation. So I've obviously blanked out of my memory. But
no, because I just remember at my book party, I think we were talking
Oh,
about it.
maybe. Yeah, that is sort of ringing a
Not
bell,
in any
yeah.
kind of depth. I think I was just like, I love horror. And you were like, me too.
I love horror. Like that's as soon as Ari Aster came on the scene, I was like, oh, I'm being seen here. Like I feel seen and personally attacked, but yeah.
Yeah.
I read a thing about, it was like on Vice or something years ago, but it was like about sort of like people that really, really love horror, how it allows them to like, a lot of times they have anxiety and it allows them to externalize their anxiety.
I
And
read
that's
about that
so
for the New
true
York
for me.
Times. I like to
Really?
think maybe you read my piece in the New York Times.
Maybe I
Yes,
did. Maybe I did. I'm giving Vice credit, stolen valor. But yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely, I definitely think that's true for me.
It's my parents. They try to counter condition me and my sister. So we grew up watching these horror movies to go to sleep. And for a while, I just thought like, oh, that's just like a fucked up thing my parents did to like teach us something, or because they were trying to be like weird experimental art freaks. And then as I grew older, like I realized, yeah, it's hard for me to fall asleep without getting that hit of adrenaline. Like if I really can't sleep, I'll watch like a jump scare horror movie because like I get that boost of adrenaline and then go immediately to sleep. But then there have been studies that show that like, yes, for people who have like anxiety conditions, nervous conditions, externalizing it through horror movies is actually like
even if you don't have like a condition though, like I
Yeah.
wouldn't say I have like a condition. I just like, I just feel like the internet's crazy. We all deal with a lot during the world, and like, it's helpful to kind of like watch it. But I don't know. This is the difference between people that like horror and don't. Say people that don't like horror, like it's obviously it's not relaxing for them. But
well, yeah, it's hard for me to sit through The Bear, but it's really easy for me to sit through most horror movies because I just find the social anxiety. Like I had trouble with Smile 2 recently, which is one recently, because it's not because of the horror of it, but because there's a scene where she's doing something, the main character is doing something and then gets humiliated in a public setting. And I so knew that scene was coming up, and I was just like, I felt such anxiety for her. I feel such anxiety when I know there's
don't
an
spoil it 'cause
altercation.
I haven't seen it
No.
yet.
No spoilers.
Oh my
no
God,
spoilers.
it's a great movie. I thought it was like so much better than the Smile one. But anyway, that's really interesting to find out. And I'm glad to know there's another big horror fan out there. I think, to circle back around, I think some of the best online content that I've seen in the creative space has been like alternate reality games and horror stuff. Our good friend Nightmind covers a lot of the, interesting and creative projects that are coming out online that you would never even know about. Because they exist in this weird niche of horror YouTube or horror, alternate reality games that spread across multiple mediums. But I do think it's some of the coolest stuff people are doing online. Scott Derrickson, very famously, kind of started there, as well as who's the one who did Lights Out?
David F. Sandberg, yeah.
David F. Sandberg, yeah. So
You
some
know all
of
the
cool
names.
stuff.
I honestly don't know anything. I just consume it.
Yeah, it's really cool.
We'll vibe about horror for sure, just because again that's our whole thing as well. So it's a good surprise. Taylor, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate you being here today, amidst the drama that you just mentioned or was happening earlier today.
There's drama every day. Someone's yelling about me, so don't worry.
We mentioned up top, but where can we find you on YouTube, social media, or otherwise?
My YouTube is just at Taylor Lorenz. Please subscribe. I'm also on Instagram at Taylor Lorenz, TikTok, and usermag.co. So that's usermag.co, not .com. Check it out.
Of course, and you can also find her book, Extremely Online, right here. Please check that out if you haven't already. You can find me at Necrotic across social media. You can find Drew at VIDEODREW across social media. You can find us at Passion Food for Us across social media. You'll find links to our Discord and our Patreon down below. And we'll catch everyone on the next episode.